Thanks so much inviting me, Ebi. Hello to everybody. I wish you a happy new year. I hope you're fine, and I'm happy to feel connected with the world again in these times. Welcome to my little office, and I hope you have prepared a small vial and a good glass of wine, so we can start. I'd like to introduce you in the world of pardessus, and especially to its technique. Today we concentrate on this delicate and special instrument which has had a history of approximately 100 years. The first surviving pardessus de viole leads us back to the year 1686 with a specimen by Michel Collichon, which is found in the museum at Nuremberg. The pardessus flourished in the mid-18th century and survived even the French Revolution for a short while. Well known as an amusement and diversion of aristocratic amateurs and particularly women, more seldom for professional virtuosos. Circa 250 surviving compositions show a large spectrum starting from simple minuets to virtuosic and demanding pieces, urging for a professional approach and an elaborated playing technique. Whereas less than 50 primarily intended pieces are extant. Short question. Is the tempo okay for you, and do you can understand everything?
Great.
Good.
Great.
Fine. So I'll continue. These numerous compositions for the pardessus offer a wide spectrum of technical demands. The pardessus itself, with its very own and special beauty, is such a sensitive and sophisticated instrument due to its very small size and narrow lighting strings. I show you mine, very fine example, and you can see it's very tiny. Does anybody of you has a pardessus here today? Oh, fine, good. Oh, that's fine. And feel encouraged to join with the treble. It's very useful too. So we have to look for detailed and professional advice to master its challenges, not really comparable to those of the bass viol. And for this reason, let's take a short and chronological glance at the surviving methods for pardessus de viole in the 18th century. Searching for didactic material and detailed technical advice, we'll end up with the violinist Giuseppe Tartini, who offers an excellent approach from which pardessus and treble and even bass players can profit. So we'll have the first example. Can you see it?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Good. That's the first method which appeared by Pierre Dupont, which is called Principe de Violon. But it offers also a short introduction into pardessus. It was printed twice in 1718 and 1740. Between rudimentary advice on violin technique, he just mentions the difference in bow direction for the pardessus. He further suggests to practice his violin music on the pardessus. You can see this sentence, he discusses a bow direction, and he offers these small exercises. It's not really much. Next example is Charles Dolé with his pièce pour le pardessus de viole, printed in Paris about 1730. The pieces composed for the purpose of instruction, he says, pour la facilité de ceux qui apprennent à jouer de cet instrument. These pieces provide continuously increasing difficulty, but without any specific didactical information. Next example is méthode raisonnée pour apprendre la musique, and so on, for flute, violin, or pardessus de viole as an alternative, printed in 1755. And Monsieur Bourdet merely describes tuning and diatonic fingering. And once again, the bow direction is opposite of the violin bowing. Does anybody of you has experience with diatonic fingering? Which means you have two frets between the fingers, which is unusual on the bigger sizes, but you can have two Ganztöne. What's it? Whole tone. Is the right expression? Yes, whole tone. Thanks, Alison. So that's a diatonic fingering. And here you have his description and the fingering with 1, 2, 3. The big advantage with that is you can avoid changes of position. You don't have to change position, so you can have a bigger range in one hand.
Simone,
yeah?
to interrupt you, because you're sharing the screen, we can't, if you're showing something on the instrument, we can't see it.
Oh, okay, good. Good. Where shall we?
There we go, that's better. I think
okay.
It would be useful to see the diatonic fingering.
I can ask again, is anybody experienced with diatonic fingering? Do you use it? Fine, okay. So it's what this method explains first. So I share again for the next method coming up. It's very interesting thing. So, Le Pardessus book de Mademoiselle Rochette is a manuscript from 1758, which is a valuable document of the Pardessus social context outside Paris and its repertoire available in provinces. Madame Rochette was a 19-year-old woman, but this manuscript also only contains basic introduction to a musical notation, a diagram with the names of the strings and their tuning and a short scale of thirds to practice here. That's all. Next one is again a method for violin, but it suggests les personnes qui jouent du pardessus de viole à 4 cordes peuvent faire, and so on, which means the method used okay. It suggests to play again violin exercises on the pardessus de viole, printed by Abbé Le Fils in 1761. His exercises for bowing are manifold and of some use for the pardessus players too. There's another picture coming up. Oh, here you can see it. he suggests these exercises for bowing, with the tirer et pousser for the violin, and the opposite for the pardessus de viole. And here you can already see demanding advices and demanding increasing level of technique. Next one is printed by Paul de Vernon in 1766. La méthode nouvelle et facile pour apprendre à jouer du pardessus de viole. That's a specific method for the pardessus de viole, but it contains not really useful exercises. For example, he writes, Paul de Vernon writes, the method used is by no means natural. It is, if it is substantial to gain power for the bow, then by the only way to press the hair with the middle finger, which is not reliable at all. It just produces notes inégales. And he also suggests the overhand grip for it. But I'd like to quote one detail of greater interest, because we'll come across this again later. He suggests or he recommends warmly to exercise using the complete length of the bow with the utmost pressure on it, with only a slight lift at the end of every bowing as the basis of all tonal nuances. So what he wants, just to exercise whole bow without interruption and with a light elevation, could you say, is that the right word, at the end and at the beginning of every bow strike. Yeah. So he says, montrer, on exercera particulièrement, attirer le son, and so on. These loud bow strikes to get into a good sound. Most detailed and the only really specific instruction for pardessus, Michel Corrette gives in his Méthode pour apprendre facilement à jouer du pardessus de viole, printed in 1748. Like his colleagues before, he uses several printed pages to explain the fingerboard and fretted notes. However, he yields useful details concerning the position of the instrument, the position of the left hand and the bow hand, together with a few exercises. Let me quickly summarize the most important ones. He says, you have to lean the end of the fingerboard against the belly, or if you are a bit taller, it should be the collarbone, so that the left hand is given all the flexibility needed to touch the strings, which means the instrument shouldn't be, in his eyes, shouldn't be free, but to your belly or collarbone. And so you have the complete freedom to play fast. But except, he says again, Michel Corrette, except for the bottom string, for which it is necessary to tilt the instrument forward to get the sound from the string more easily. So put it a bit forward. You will know this little detail from the bass viol. Further interesting detail he tells us is it has to be added that the third or middle finger has to give both power and tenderness to the bow by moving it forward into the hand and pushing onto the hair to get a great sound. You will know this too from the bass viol. Use the hair with the middle finger. Further, he suggests, as for the down bows, the wrist has to be flexed outwards. And as for the up bowings, the wrist has to be flexed inside. And it is necessary that the wrist accompanies the arm, but without displacing the elbow. And I find this is a very interesting and important detail, watching and observing your own arm and your own elbow for economic movings, not too much. The most economic way you can find with a relaxed elbow and arm. That's what Michel Corrette wants. And again, he suggests at the beginning you should get used to push and pull long bow strikes. That seems to be the basic exercise in every decade and every method going on with small sizes of string instruments. One further interesting detail of Michel Corrette. As for the large bowings, again, it depends on not moving the arm too fast. That's one important detail to observe on yourself when you play, that your arm, even with long strokes or fast strokes, don't move too fast like a bird. Go as slow as possible. Which means a very economic way to strike. Further interesting detail, you might know, Corrette says, while playing the bow needs to be a good finger's distance away from the bridge. And a finger's distance, did you hear about that detail? One finger's distance is it's not very much. It's very close to the bridge, really. So in his eyes, this position to the bridge would be ideal, which creates an intense sound. And you will know that just to practice that on the small sizes of viols, it can be very hard not to change position, just to hold this delicate point of position. It is evident that Michel Corrette's instructions serve the beginners and amateurs and not really the professional players. This method and all the others have in common that they shortly outline the basics like tuning, fingerboard and fretted notes. They explain the notation system without further didactical instructions or just the basic ones, and then immediately and directly proceed to printed pieces. However, it's highly interesting to notice that Michel Corrette enlarges upon advice and exercises in his two violin methods printed later. That's his pardessus method, and we come across his first violin method, L'école d'Orphée, printed 1738. And here you have a good example for advanced exercises with scales and tour de force, triads, chords. Following some, yes, yes, compared to all remaining violin methods, clearly practice-oriented and not confined to the needs of beginners, but for the advanced, ambitious performer here. Comparing Corret's method for pardessus to both his violin methods, this is his later one from 1782. And you can see also here increasing level of exercises. And these two methods for violin encouraged me to see the bigger picture. So I consulted the treatises of the great violin teacher Giuseppe Tartini. He seems to have been the first to have separated technical demands from music and the first to show detailed methods to improve skills in his famous and legendary Lettera alla Signora Maddalena Lombardini, written in Padua 1760. He gives some really good advice. For example, here, attachez-vous d'abord, and so on, which means start by pressing the bow lightly upon the strings in such a manner as that the beginning of the bowing seems to be like breath. And strictly speaking, this advice contains two exercises. First, just press lightly upon the strings, still without striking. You can try this on your treble. Just press lightly, just to feel the point you, this small point or section where you touch the string, just to feel without striking. You can use several positions of the bow for that. And Tartini's second advice is after exercising, just to feel this position, start with a very light bow. And you will be able to have such a smooth sound without any noise or interruption.
Simona, talking about interruptions, I've got to stop you there. There's a suggestion from one of the participants about your sound, because when you sustain a note on the instrument, it seems to fade out. And so it is suggested that you check that you have enabled your original sound so that there is no interruption.
Is this a technical problem, or is this the impression from my instrument or my playing?
It's a zoom issue because of how it decides which sound to focus on. And at the moment, it's cutting off any sustained sound from your instrument. So we could hear the beginning of the notes, but when you start to move the bow, it cuts it out.
So that's not my fault.
No, it's not. It's not. But there is a setting, a sound setting to override this, and it is basically, if you can find the setting. It means that you've got to find the setting button, so it may not be a practical thing to do now. But if you are able to find the setting button, it's a matter of enabling your original sound.
The setting button is
so you go to
down,
go back to home, find the setting.
Sorry, I'm not able to do that. So just imagine a wonderful sound.
I think we've just got to imagine it.
Yes. And we'll meet in person someday and practice that together.
I think participants would just have to imagine the sustained sound. But I mean, short sounds are okay. So, and the other issue is if you talk over a note, think the Zoom will either pick up your voice and cut out the sound, or will cut out both voice and sound. So the participants will hear nothing.
Oh, thanks. That's good
Okay.
to know. So we continue with Tartini's advices. For example, he suggests, make sure you can press the bow in this way in every situation, every part of the bow, in the middle as well as at the extremities, and in moving it up as well as in drawing it down. And I combined this information and transferred it into actual notation system for exercise number 1. You might have got before that lesson. Do you have it? You have this paper prepared, which came with the invitation for this lesson?
Yeah.
Good. So let's have a look at the first exercise. That's what Tartini says. So just press the bow in this way without striking, still without striking, in every situation, every part of the bow. So the top and the middle and at the frog or at the end. So, and when you have found these 3 positions, you can start with small strokes. And Tartini suggests to exercise these small strokes with the up bow or down bow. Or in the middle, up, down, or at the frog, up, down. And combine these small advices to endless series of exercises. When you regard number 1 on the paper, starting the first line with up bow, then down bow, and then you can combine up and down bow in one exercise. And this delivers a series of very demanding examples. For example, up, down, down, up, down, down, without any interruption. Just with the, even when the bow is in the air, it should keep very calm and strict. So continuing with Tartini, he suggests long bow strikes. For le son filé, you might have heard that for French viol music and violin music. Tartini describes it also. Start these continuous bows on an open string, start in a pianissimo and increase the tone by slow degrees to its fortissimo. This study should equally be made with the up and the down bow. On this exercise, you should spend at least 1 hour a day. And be honest, anybody here who practiced 1 hour a day just empty strings, I have to admit, I tried. It's very hard. It's really hard. And I ended up with half an hour per day. That should be enough. Yes, strictly spoken, this device contains also 2 exercises. First, le son filé, a continuous bow without any break or interruption between up and down bow. And especially on the small viols, this is very hard to practice, to avoid any interruption at the end of the bow strike. I don't know how this sounded. The idea is to create a continuous sound without any interruption. And practicing that, try, if you practice it for yourself, try to get to the limits of the sound and risk scratchy sound to explore all the options of your viol, and then go back to a nice sound. Yes, I made the experience just play risk or try to risk to have a larger range of possibilities for dynamics. Don't be shy to produce ugly sounds before reaching real forte. The way back to a smooth sound is so easy then, and you have reached the optimum of your instrument's sound in this way. So we go further with Tartini and his famous trills or shakes. Can you see it? Do you have it on your screen?
Yes, it's a bit small, so if there's a way of enlarging it.
Good, I try.
That's much better, and if you can go even larger, that's even better. Yeah, so keep going.
Good, so he says, Tartini, for a good shake or trill, one should practice it slowly, moderately fast, and quickly. For our purposes, I added the fingering now first for the whole tone between first and second finger, and then with the half tone between first and second finger, and created exercise number 2 on your paper. With Tartini's advice, just start slowly. I'll be back for that. Start slowly, which means that. And so on, moderately fast. And fast. And practice that strictly, regularly, or equally. And you will get the complete mastery of the pardessus. And he further suggests, which I find interesting, it is necessary to practice all passages in both ways, with a down bow or an up bow in order to gain complete mastery of the bow. Again, for that advice, I use Tartini's drills, just creating exercise number 3 on the paper. Can use this simple drills to practice the first way up bow, yes, with up bow, and which means that. And so on. And a second way with down bow for the same exercise. Which feels a bit strange at the beginning, but if you you are able to practice both ways, you will soon see even virtuosic and very fast passages and scales might go easier. So in summary, I can say, I'd like to say the reason for lack of extensive and elaborate exercises and study might be that the aristocratic amateur and lady shouldn't be bothered with tedious efforts on the pardessus. On the other hand, the detailed violin methods were written for professional players and their needs. As professional pardessus player or professional to be, we have to face the comparison with the skills of violin players if we desire to perform with our sophisticated instruments. Thanks to Tartini's exercises, it is possible to develop an awareness of the bow we wouldn't find in the pardessus methods. I would even go as far as to claim that his advice summarized in this paper may serve as a complete tutor for learning the pardessus de viole professionally if you already are a good bass viol player. It was recommended to Mademoiselle Adélaïde de France, the most prominent disciple of the pardessus, which I brought for you. You might know this wonderful picture. Here she is sitting with the violin on her side. She desired to learn the pardessus too, but she was recommended to learn the bass viol before starting with the pardessus to be able to get along with the difficulties. On the other hand, I'm convinced that with the pardessus or treble and its refined bowing technique, a scholar will be able to develop an intense and profound feeling for the bow in general. That was for the bass viol as well. So I'm at the end with my material. I can send you some links to pardessus music if you want. I can publish in the chat. And I would be pleased to have a discussion. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I try my best to answer.
I think Thomas Monk has a question there. Go on, Thomas.
Just a very quick one. Thank you very much for a lovely introduction to the pardessus, Simone. Anything in any of the manuals about lifting your bow off? Because in your example 1, one might be tempted, especially on small instruments, to let them have as much resonance as they have, which is not a great deal by comparison with the bass. But if you actually lift your bow off, do any of the instruction manuals talk about lifting the bow off completely?
I didn't find anything about it, but it is worth exercising to lift off and to keep a very steady and calm bow, even in the motion, even it moving in the air. You can add this as an additional exercise, which is very useful. Strike complete bow without any shake or without any interruption in the air, 1 millimeter above your string. You will see that's really hard. Try to keep calm hand. So striking in the air is also very important.
So just John Stones. John, go on.
Hi, thanks for that. I've got a question about the bow that we use for the pardessus. Am I coming through?
Yeah.
Yeah, about the bow. I know that one of Tartini's bows was what we would call a transitional bow, and most people play the pardessus with Baroque bows, but we know that some of the bows found with pardessus had the later curve, the later head. And I was wondering what your thoughts were on that and how that affects these exercises and how we play the pardessus.
That's an interesting question, but since the pardessus is a late instrument which has its high time in the middle of 18th century, I never thought about the early bows, so I just can tell about my experience about the more modern Baroque bow, and it works very well on pardessus.
But some of the bows actually have the later curve and a much higher head than yours. They look,
much far ahead. You mean the curve is bigger? Okay.
The curve goes, like on a modern violin bow, and with a much different looking head as well. And we know Tartini had one of those bows as well. So just wondering whether that affects how we play the instrument.
Should be interesting to try to compare different bows and different type of bows with that sound. Good. That's our challenge for next time.
Okay.
I guess at this time, because the pardessus, its height, it was the time when bows began to change from the Baroque shape to the later shape with a higher head. So you might see players using both kinds of bows, but it's really interesting to try, I guess, as Simone says, and see what the effects are. If you have a modern violin bow, it might be interesting to see what it sounds like, how it works on the pardessus.
Yes, and as I told before, we have some advices for overhand grip on the pardessus. So it seems that all variations of possibilities were in use.
I've got a question about the overhand grip, but there are two other people here with raised hands. So Tom McCracken.
Yes. Hello. Thank you very much, Simone, for this talk. I wanted to go back just briefly to your mention of the first surviving pardessus by Colichon. There are actually two now, and the one that's in Nuremberg has no date, but the one that's dated 1686 is the earliest datable one, and it's in the United States here now.
Oh, good to know. So I have to correct this information. Yes, I have it from secondary literature.
It's a small point, but there are now two Colichons.
It probably wasn't someone I would have chosen anyway, but that wasn't the problem. You were choosing her, and
I'm sorry. Could you make sure that we're all muted?
Basic mental instability, really.
Just 1 moment.
Weren't obvious.
Everyone is muted.
It got worse.
I'm afraid I've had to mute everyone because of that interruption. So those who were talking just now, would you mind just unmuting yourselves again, please? And that includes Simone as well, because I've just had to mute everyone because of that slight interruption.
I have a question to you. Did you get any ideas how to practice these little advices on your smaller viols? Did you get ideas or to get inspiration to practice these things for yourself? I see a thumb. Okay, good. That's fine. That's what I'd like to reach or to deliver.
Tom McCracken, did you have any more to add to your comment about the two Collichon pardessus viols?
No, not really, but I'll take just a moment to say that it's interesting to observe the transition from 6-string pardessus, which is how they started out, which is what Simone is showing us in the illustrations, to the later 5-string. It's perhaps not widely known that they overlapped, both kinds being used in the middle decades of the century, of the 18th century, the 1740s and 50s. People were making both kinds, and I assume that were playing both kinds.
And what about the tuning of the of those two different models? The 5-string sounds as if it has the potential of being tuned in fifths, or a combination of fifths and fourths. So was there a standard tuning, or did the tuning vary according to the time period, repertory?
What I found, what I experienced, that the middle string, the F or E, can either be a F or a E, depending on the key you play. For example, I studied a sonata in F minor, and this needed other tuning for the middle string, which was interesting. So I guess that all the variations of tunings were in use, combinations of quarts and quints, and the tierce.
Thirds. And is the top string always G and
Yes.
not higher than the tenor viol?
Yes, it is. But the lower strings have several variations.
Jackie Robertson-Wade has a question. Jackie.
Unmute myself. Hello. Hi.
Hello.
I just want to get back to bows, if we could. What's the ideal length, do you think? Because if you're playing with a violinist and you want to have the same amount of bow on a long notes on Corelli, you're at a real disadvantage because you've got your hand on the hair. Do you, what length of bow hair, playing hair do you have? And is your bow a particular model, or what have you got, and what's the weight of it?
No, it's just a treble viol bow I use because in my experience, for my playing, it was more important to have a bit heavier bow, which I found important. If it is too light, I was disappointed with creating bigger sounds. So I've chosen a bow which fits good for a treble viol as well. But I didn't compare different lengths, to be honest.
Okay.
If you find that your bow is too short, just strike more slowly.
So one doesn't need a special pardessus bow, if one, say, decides to buy a pardessus for the first time, one doesn't need to buy a bow to go with it. I mean,
well, I think they do actually, because my treble bow, I find on the top string it just kills the sound a little bit. And when we're looking around 41 grams as opposed to sort of late 40s, early 50s for treble.
So Jackie, so it's more the weight than the length, is it? At least in your case. Or is it both?
Yeah, I think it's just sometimes when I'm competing with a violin, I feel disadvantaged if I have my shorter bow. I've got a longer bow and a shorter bow for pardessus, and it would just be useful to know, you know, whether there was I don't know, you know, who were the bow makers who at the time. Whose bows do we copy for a pardessus bow? You know, what is a genuine pardessus bow? And I know John's, you know, alluded to that in the he was saying about having a high head and transitional bow. It's very difficult to say because you know a lot of the later repertoire is rococo, isn't it? And but then earlier, you know, very much in the baroque. So it's tricky. It's almost like we almost need two bows for pardessus, really, depending on what we're playing. And actually, if you're playing a 6-string, you're playing up to about 1760, aren't you? If you're playing 5-string, you're starting from around 1730.
And also the question whether the stick is stiff or a little bit more flexible, because that also affects the kind of articulation that you'll be doing on the instrument as dictated by the music.
Also, sizes of pardessus are sort of different sometimes. Mine is a bit larger, so I can use it as a treble viol in D or as a pardessus in G. Thomas, you might know about sizes of pardessus.
Yours looks like a viol. They don't all look. Some of them look like violins, don't they?
Yeah. I've got a,
and those we tend to call cantons these days, although they weren't quite so precise about differentiating in the 18th century. They tended to call anything with 5 strings a canton, but we sort of saved that word for the violin looking notes.
I've always thought that cantons has a curved back instead of a flat back, but I may have been misled. So if it's got a flat back, it's a pardessus, and if it's got a curved back, carved, and it's a canton. But
yeah, this is a canton.
So Edie, mostly you're right about that, but there are of course exceptions in both directions. There are instruments that are quite hybrid with C holes and unpointed body corners but an arched back, and then there are ones that look like violins but have a flat back. But both of those groups are exceptions to the general rule, I think, that the pardessus has a flat back and the canton.
I was able to play a canton by Fleury years ago, and it had a flat back.
This is an early 18th century canton, and it's got a curved back and F holes, but no overlap, as you'd expect from a later canton.
Jackie, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just 2 technical issues here. I mean, not regarding your instrument, it's regarding Zoom again. But you're not showing on the screen for some reason. I don't know if anyone else has this issue, but you and the other thing is your sound. You sound a little bit distant.
Oh, okay.
It may be my.
Okay here.
It's okay there. Well, in that case, that's fine.
I can see and hear, Jackie.
Can you see me? Because I can see myself on Zoom.
Oh, I can see you now. Thank you.
I don't know what.
I don't know what happened.
Jackie, could you please hold your instrument closer to the camera to have a closer look? It's very interesting. Do you know the exact year when it has been built?
There's no label in it.
Oh, okay.
But it definitely is violin. Very, very definitely. I put it beside my husband's baroque violin, and it's almost identical.
It's beautiful.
Fine. Thanks. Any more questions?
Yes. What do you think about the use of pardessus in consort music?
Oh, don't ask me that. I wouldn't do that. Just practice higher positions on the treble and it will work. every concert music.
We've got 3 raised hands. I'm sorry, I've lost track of who's first. So I don't know. Carol?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So you mentioned a little bit ago about different tunings, and I wasn't sure if you meant for the pardessus, because I'm aware, I mean, this is an alt treble. I know that for treble there's an E or F string, but it's also the same for pardessus.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
For example, I went through the 6 sonatas of Jean-Baptiste Barrière, and the last in F minor wouldn't suit to the tuning of the first 5 sonatas, so I had to retune.
Okay.
For only 1 sonata.
So I studied bass viol, and then a few years ago I bought the treble, thinking I could use it in consort, and then the pandemic came. So and I didn't get a lot of experience unfortunately on the pardessus. I took one home I was in Weimar, and I took one home over Christmas break, and I'm a cellist, so it was difficult. But anyway, my question was more about the tuning. Maybe someday I'll get a pardessus.
Thank you very much. So John Bryan.
Yes, thank you, Simone. I was just going to ask a question about violin and pardessus, and whether any of the treatises that you've investigated say anything about the comparative sounds of the 2 instruments. I mean, one gets the impression that pardessus players often played violin music, but do any of the writers say anything about how different or similar the 2 instruments might sound?
As far as I know, the sound of treble viol and a violin is often compared. The treble viol is told to be tender and more delicate, and the violin in comparison more vivid. Is that the right word? Vivid and more powerful. You find these descriptions, yes, but not especially with the pardessus de viole. I should have a closer look to that question, yes. Going through the sources again.
John Stones has another question. John.
Yeah, thanks for allowing me to ask too. A question also about pardessus and violin. When we play violin music on the pardessus, are you suggesting from those exercises, from the Tartini exercises, that we just do whatever a violinist would do, but the other way around? Or do you think there's something specifically about playing a viol shaped, or a viol bow hold, that you would change how you bow something? Like if you played Corelli, would you just do a mirror image, or would you change things?
Of course, the way you produce the sound is completely different, but these exercises work very well on the viol, on the small viols too, because of its size, because of its delicate, narrow lying strings, fine strings. So the demands, for example, for the left hand is comparable, I would say. You want, if you want to reach a certain virtuosity.
I was thinking more about the bowing. So up bows and down bows have quite different quality when you're playing violin and when you're playing pardessus. So whether you would, rather than just copy a violinist, you sort of go and do your own thing.
Or
on both instruments, a down bow would sound quite different and an up bow. So stay on the specific bowing, either for pardessus or violin. Did you mean that?
Well, what I mean is, if you do a mirror image, they sound quite different, because on the violin there's a much stronger difference between the two, and on with the viol bow hold there's not such a big difference, and to do two ops and stuff like that sounds different.
Oh, now I understand. Yes, that's not only what Tardini suggests, to exercise long up bows and long down bows to get a regular and powerful sound. That's what the sources before told too. But I'd like to find out. If you remember, Michel Corrette also says that, and some of the other methods told that just exercise up bow and down bow in the same way to get a great sound, and all the nuances you need afterwards will result from that.
So I guess it's perhaps it's similar to what I'm wondering, in that if you were playing violin music on the pardessus, do you pretend to be a violin, or do you stick with the fact that you're actually playing a viol and preserve the character of the viol sound and the viol bow strokes, or do you try and imitate what the violin does? More detached bowing, I don't know, short, even spiccato type bowing. Should a pardessus player aspire to do this, or should they be more viol-like?
That depends on your own and personal taste, I would say, and I would stay with the instrument itself and its specific delicate sound, which is not comparable to anything else, and not comparable to violin sound. But I think it could be a good exercise as well, trying to imitate the violin to find out the limits of the pardessus and go back and to explore its specific and own sound again. Just experiment. Be experimental and try all the ways and find your own sound and the sound of your instrument. It's not only my personal sound, but I have to go in the instrument and to explore what the instrument delivers and wants to tell.
Jackie may have a comment on this. Jackie.
This makes me laugh actually, because Michael, who plays Brock violin, my husband and I, we have hours of discussion about this. Because he's much more off the string.
So Jackie, sorry to interrupt. So do you tell him to be more like a viol, and does he tell you to be more like a violin?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm always telling him to get on the string, and he's always telling me to get off the string. It is quite amusing and trying to match. I wonder whether John was just wondering whether with Corelli, if you do a down up up on a violin, do you do a push pull pull? Is that what you mean, John?
Yes, exactly what I meant, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's for Simone.
Ah, okay. The bow corrections, you mean? Oh.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if I understood correctly.
Well, if it's on the violin, if it's a down, up, up, would you just do the exact opposite when you're playing pardessus, or would you modify it?
Depends on the style. If I play violin music, I would prefer that just the opposite. And for earlier music, I'm not sure. I often prefer the viole way, just keep the direct, just don't, without too much corrections, just stay. Did you understand what I mean?
Yes, yes.
Sorry.
Let's see if there's anyone else who has any questions or comments they'd like to make about the pardessus. Any questions to Simone? If you've never played a pardessus and you'd like to try the instrument and you're finding suitable music to try, what would you recommend, Simone?
Well, for example, Telemann's duets. Do you know them for flute or violin? It's very delicious on pardessus, for example. Or,
Do you mean the canonic sonatas?
For example, yes, and there are more duets for much more duets for flute and violins, which you can play on the pardessus very well. But I must be honest, I never tried violin music really, because there's so much specific pardessus music to explore, and I'm not through all of it.
Because there's so much of it.
Yes.
Mm. Is just to, I was trying to recall this question that I've been wanting to ask you, I keep forgetting it. Does the pardessus exist elsewhere in Europe? Was it only in France, or was there a similar kind of instrument elsewhere in Europe that is higher than the treble?
As far as I am informed, it only existed in France, but Tom might know more because he collected all the details worldwide. Do you have any more information about that question? Is it limited to France?
It's almost all French, or we can assume they're French. And if you include Belgium, modern day Belgium in that cultural sphere, I get very suspicious of anything that claims to be a German pardessus, for example. There's probably some funny backstory about that. If the size is right, it was perhaps be cut down in order to be able to play pardessus tuned higher on what was originally a treble and therefore too big to be tuned up to G. But the answer is nearly always it's French.
Thank you very much. We've got a question from Richard, I think, Richard Corrin.
Yes, I was going to say there are a number of sonatas by Telemann for recorder dessous de viole and continuo. Do you think that's therefore treble rather than pardessus from what you just said?
Yes, definitely it's for treble. Telemann used the treble very often, but never the pardessus.
Right, okay, that's interesting.
And also the range of this particular music fits very well on the treble.
No, I knew about the range, but I just when it says dessous, I didn't know quite whether it meant pardessus or treble. Yeah. Okay, good.
Carol, yes. Go on, Carol.
Just to follow up on this question that RSJ, Mr. Corrin, said, so these, what are they were for Telemann for treble?
Trio sonatas for treble recorder, house recorder,
Yes, there are 4 or 5, and even he wrote trio sonatas for oboe and treble viol.
If you don't know them, they're very, very lovely pieces. There's a whole set of them specified for treble viol.
Okay, and how can I find them? What, on I Am Asleep, or?
It's annoying.
Yes.
It's usually labeled as violin music. But sorry, go on, Simone.
You'll find it. Do you know the Amadeus Verlag in Switzerland?
No, but I'm writing it down.
They published all these trio sonatas.
So they're trio sonatas that involve treble viol.
And oboe, yes.
In
or
oboe.
treble viol and recorder.
Or treble viol and recorder. Okay.
If I may interrupt, they are not so easy to spot because they are labeled as violin music to widen the market, I guess, so that violinists can play the music. So they often say trio sonata for violin, oboe, whatever, and actually it's treble viol music.
But you'll find the manuscripts which are located in Darmstadt in the library. You'll find it in the internet. It's all in Imslip.
IMSLP. Yes.
Oh, so it is on AMSLP.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Most of them.
Okay, because I have this instrument and would love to do something with it. Besides, yeah. Okay, but is there actually solo music for treble viol, or is it all chamber music, consort music?
Really, solo music doesn't exist, but I can recommend, for example, from Jacob van Eyck, the recorder music, which fits very well on the treble.
I think there are a few Telemann that mention the dessous de viol as a solo instrument. I can't remember what it's called, I can't, doesn't come back to me, but there is one collection, I think.
I've played Ortiz on the treble viol just as a matter of exercise, but then to switch to bass viol immediately afterwards and just to sprain my brain. But yeah, that's what I've done.
We've got literally a couple of minutes to go, but just to comment on that, if I remember correctly, one of the Telemann Gamba sonatas, he specifies that it can be played either on bass viol or treble viol, and I think it's the G major sonata. So there is one solo sonata for Gamba by Telemann that can be played on the treble viol, and I think it works really well. I have done it on the treble viol. Okay, if there's no more questions, just to make sure, I think we've reached the, Richard, did you want to comment on anything else?
No.
Okay, I'm going to lower your hand. Well, perhaps we should give Simone a round of applause for her most interesting talk on the pardessus. Thank you so much, Simone. And thank you everyone for attending this session. I'm hoping to have another one next month in February, so do look out in your inbox, and hopefully, if everything goes according to plan, we'll have a session on posture and Alexander technique, because this is such an important aspect on playing. Just to be aware of the body and what you do while you play. You know, often you've played a whole day, you've been in a consort, or you've been rehearsing like me a whole day, and you go home and you sleep. The next morning you can't get out of bed because you're aching all over and you haven't been sitting correctly, or you've been tensing. And so I think a session on Alexander technique or just posture is a useful thing, but I'm still planning that. So do watch out for the invitation in your inbox. And I'll see you next time. Stay safe. Good night. Goodbye.